Okay. Is Kevin here?
Yes.
Oh.
He's on there, or he was. All right, we're live now.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to call to order the specially called meeting work session, which is our virtual community forum. Right now, the only other board member I can see present is Mr. Wilson. Is there anyone else on?
Debbie, I'm here.
Oh, okay, Allison, I cannot even see your dot.
Carrie.
Is Sherry here?
Yes.
Okay. So let the record show that everyone but Ms. Bradley is here. Ms. Bradley is absent. Ms. Bradley told me a couple of weeks ago that she would not be available tonight because she has business that is out of state and would probably be driving during this hour. I'm going to just make a quick announcement and then we'll get into our agenda. While it's common practice for forums to have a moderator who screens questions, eliminating superfluous comments, inflammatory language, and organizes questions by subject in order to run the forum in an efficient and productive manner to be the most beneficial to the participants. However, I've agreed not to do that tonight. I will be reading the questions and comments verbatim. I will then let each member have the opportunity to answer each question that they care to answer. Because of our virtual setting, it will be difficult at times to make sure everyone is heard and that we don't interrupt each other. This is why I'll go around the table and call on each member. If you want to speak and you have not, please try to get my attention. Sometimes that's difficult, I understand. I also want to announce that there will not be a representative from Baird tonight. None of them were available. They have provided me with the bonding updates, and I did send those to the board members, and hopefully we can get them up on the screen for our viewers. And they've also provided me with the answers to 2 questions that were directed to them. So with that, we'll begin. Thank you. The first item is the presentation by the architect. Kevin?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can everyone hear Kevin?
Okay. I'm going to need to share my screen. Let me know when you can see this.
Okay.
It's up. Okay, great.
Not for me. Do I need to do something to see it?
Just give it a couple more seconds. It'll probably come to.
Okay.
You still don't have it, Debbie?
No.
Okay.
I can see it. I changed my layout to Spotlight, and that brought it up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let me try that out.
Are you seeing the full screen presentation or the preview?
I can see the preview right now.
Full screen now.
Okay, great.
Yep, now it's full screen.
When I'm changed, oh, I see it. I've got it.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to present. What I would like to do here is go over where we are with the progress of the project. As mentioned in the past, we've pretty much completed the design development phase of the project, and that involved a cost estimate as well as some updated drawings, and we'd like to present that as part of the community forum tonight. Want to talk about 3 options tonight. The first option is going to be the full high school. And when I say full high school, hopefully you can see my notes here. This is the full high school layout. So this is the master plan site plan that we're designing to. Down at the bottom here, that's where the current middle school is, and the Anderson development is over in this area. This is the 65 plus or minus acres that the school district bought. And this is the current site plan showing where the building is located. It's showing a visitor parent roof here with about 40 parking spaces in the front. It's also showing a greenhouse as an alternate and the auditorium as an alternate. It's showing a bus loop and staff parking in the back here. That's approximately 150 parking spaces there. And it's also showing a student parking and a band practice area right in here, and that's about 273 parking spaces. There's a alternate here for a track and a practice field that would eventually become a football stadium. We're also showing a future field house as well as future softball, future baseball location, and future tennis courts on the site. So this is this pond in this area, and there is a bit of a stream that kind of runs in this area. So you may have noticed that the football stadium was located in this area, but we have moved it in this area to get away from that stream and the potential wetlands there. So that's the site plan. When we look at the building, we're looking at option one. So we're going to be looking at two options for the high school building. And then the third option, or option three, is a quick look at what we have done as far as taking a look at the renovation of the existing high school. So that's option number three. Option number one, though, this is showing 4 alternates to the project. Alternates are additive alternates. When I say base bid over here, you can see estimated construction cost, base bid, and then we have soft cost. So construction cost and soft cost together add up to total project cost. Owners only care about total project cost. Construction managers and architects, we only care about construction costs. So that's why those two are broken out there. So when we look at this project in its entirety, we have selected 4 alternates that we think would be good alternates for the board to consider. The first alternate is an auditorium for approximately 500 students in there, and that is a construction cost estimated right around $2 million. Another alternate that would be a good one for the board to consider is a geothermal HVAC system, as well as some of the things that have been asked for. A greenhouse is very important to the high school as far as some of the CTE programs and ag programs that are there. Track and practice field, that's what I showed in the site plan earlier. That's about $650,000. Total alternate cost here is about $3.65 in construction cost. That is pretty much the difference between this construction cost number here and the construction cost number here with the alternates. We add on typically about 21% for soft cost to come up with the total project cost that you're seeing here. So you're looking at a spread of about $49.5 million to roughly $54 million. The schedule is listed over here. The pros and cons, obviously, this is a fully functional high school for 1,350 students. It has a competition gymnasium. And Mr. Hawkins, I apologize. Last time I told you that it was only seating 1,800. It actually seats 2,000 in its current configuration. And we are compiling information about other high schools in the Commonwealth that are similar size, that have larger competition gyms as requested. This particular scheme, another science lab classrooms are sized for 1,400 students. That doesn't sound like much, but it's actually an additional lab, an additional classroom as compared to 1,350. The alternates give the board flexibility about $4.5 million on bid day. The storm shelter, as previously discussed in both of these schemes that you'll be seeing, is this area here in blue, and that is the music suite. And this is basically everything that all the programming came up with in that process, and all the meetings that we had with various faculty, staff, and students, as well as the steering committee. There is a general fund commitment or a nickel tax. The athletic facilities at the nearby Palm Springs Park and Rec Center would still be able to be utilized as long as the district is intent on keeping that lease together. So that is option number one. The cost, I do want to talk a little bit about the costs that we've noted here. And there are some things that we can discuss a little bit more, but the costs that you're seeing here do not include any value engineering options, and a list of those options was sent out for people to review. That was a preliminary list. A value engineering process is where you brainstorm with the construction manager and the design team to come up with items. Then you go through a vetting process, and those are the items that were thought to be items worthy of talking to the board about. But we have not had any discussions with the board or the district concerning any of those value engineering items. So these prices do not reflect any of the value engineering items because that process is not complete right now. The other thing that I'll note is that these costs are not taking into account what we're seeing as a increase in competition among contractors right now, and the bidding environment that we're seeing right now is very favorable to owners and districts. So those prices are not reflected here, and we can talk about that a little bit more as we go along, but I just wanted to point that out. Option number two is saying that you would do an academic sized classroom wing that would be for 1,000 students. It would be for the 10th through 12th grades, and then the common spaces would be sized for the full build out of 1,350 students. The only reason that we are even considering this is because it gives us, or the district, a larger spread between this $54 million number and this $44.1 million. So there is a classroom wing addition here at the end of each of these wings that could be an alternate to the project, and that alternate is currently estimated right around $4.4 million right now. We still have the additional 4 alternates that we had in option number 1, but what this is doing, it's giving us about a $9–10 million spread come bid day for the owner to pick which options or alternates they are able to select based on the bidding environment. So this gives the district a fully functional high school. It provides the district greater financial flexibility. Obviously, this would require redistricting. The elementary schools are currently undersized to the point where the thought was that we could pull the 6th graders back out of the middle school and into the elementary schools where they seem to do better from an academic and a disciplinary standpoint. It's not a wonderful option to present to any district to plan on redistricting, but again, it does have a couple of pros attached to it. First one being that it's giving the district financial flexibility. Also, there's room in the elementary schools, and 6th graders do tend to do better in an elementary school setting. There are other cons with this. The local planning committee will probably have to reconvene to amend the district facility plan. And then we would have to have a discussion with KDE and probably even get a Kentucky Board of Education waiver to build a 1,000 student high school of this particular size. But it has been done in the past. Moving forward, option 3 was a quick look at what we could do to the existing high school to make it a to do the best that we could with that. There are some stipulations from the Kentucky Department of Education that say that the total project cost for a renovation of an existing building is not allowed to exceed 80% of the cost for new construction. So what that does is that limits the total project cost for renovation of the high school to roughly $35.6 million. There are some definite pros to this. This is the least expensive option. In this particular scheme that we've come up with here, it does provide new academic spaces for classrooms, administration, and media center. It does add an auditorium to the high school. There are some definite cons to discuss here as well. There is a much longer construction period, and there is potentially more disruption for students and staff who occupy the building during phase construction. The existing gym, cafeteria, music suite, as well as the CTE ag spaces, we only receive minor renovations in this particular scheme. And the existing site is very much still undersized for a high school of this size, and it does not have the option to expand that I'm aware of anyway. And a definite drawback here is this would be a completely different design for renovating the high school. So those are the three options that we have discussed with the board and now open for comment to the community forum. I do want to go over a few additional things here. We have come up with two aesthetic options, and I think probably the best way to get feedback from everybody on this is to post this on the newwoodfordhs.com, the newwoodfordhighschool.com website, and somehow allow people to voice their opinions one way or the other. We're going to show two different options here. The first option is a little bit more of a traditional look. So this is driving into the parent loop, and you're seeing the media center pretty much in front of you, and that was seen as kind of one of the major highlights of this particular scheme. A little bit more traditional look here with the red brick and the stone base and the gabled roof structure on the top. A little bell tower over to the right here with an entrance canopy, and there's the entrance to the building. And then taking up a little higher look here, this is a bit of an aerial shot that shows that same media center, the administration area. This is that storm shelter area here, which is the music suite. The auditorium is shown in the back here, and then the competition gym with the weight room and the fitness rooms in the back here in this smaller portion. These are the academic wings here, as well as the academic wing along this area. So that's a little bit more of a traditional look as to what the high school is currently envisioned. And then the second scheme that we're showing you is a little bit more of a contemporary look and feel to the project. And you're still seeing the same basic shapes. But what this scheme or option is showing you is something a little bit more modern in appearance. The media center is a little bit more toned down, and we're toning up the entrance a little bit more so here. We still have a lower canopy, but we have a higher canopy as well on top, designating the entrance. And then just the aerial view of that particular shot. Everything else is pretty much in the same place, but it is a little bit more of a streamlined look and feel. We've lost the gable roof. So these are two options that we'd love to get the community to offer some feedback on, and that is pretty much our presentation at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I'm excited that we can get this up on a website and get some comments, since it's difficult for us to all gather these days. That's probably the best alternative, and that way more people can look, because they can't always come out anyway.
Right.
Like I said, the bonding agent is not here. She did send me her the updates, the latest updates. I only had to do it on the 350. We didn't go all the way up to 600 like before, because we've decided not to restrict that. So Scott, did we determine if we could get that up on a screen, or?
Yeah, Bob's going to be able to get it up.
Okay.
Debbie, while Bob's getting that up, I just had a few things about the architect presentation. So just to be clear, with the current BG1 we have, where we restricted the $350,000 last month, we can't afford option one, the partial high school, or option one, the full high school.
We have, when these come up, we have 47.2 million in bonding. They have changed again in a positive way for us. We have $1 million with Kevin. And you know, all of this is so, I think especially in this climate, and Kevin, please jump in, with the changing environment as far as competitive bids, the economy and all of that, who knows? I think you would put a 6.5%.
Yeah, go over that if you'd like me to real quick.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And I'll just
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just finish my question first. So option one, as it's been presented and given to us, we do not have enough on the BG1 to afford the partial high school. We do not have enough on option one to afford a full high school. On option two, we may have enough if we get a really good deal and things go down and everything works out perfectly to build a high school for 1,000 students, which would require us to leave our ninth graders somewhere and redistrict elementary schools, middle schools, and the high school. But we still don't have enough for a 1,000 student full high school. And then option three, the renovation, is the only one with the current BG1 that we would be able to afford. And it doesn't seem like the board's very interested in that. So, you know, my comment just is that I feel like, again, restricting our general fund dollars and using our 1.2 million in cash to set aside for either a partial high school or 1,000-person high school just really does not make sense right now with the fiscal situation. And this is no fault of Kevin's. I mean, this is, you know, the numbers are what the numbers are. But I think that, just to be very clear, the BG1 that we currently have, which takes $350,000 out of our general fund, and once bonds are sold, that's about $7 million. That takes 1.2 million in cash out of our general fund, and that restricts our capital outlay, 80% of that, so that we can't do any repairs or those sorts of things. It is just, in this fiscal climate, especially after our meeting last night, you know, it's just something that the board really needs to, I would hope, just take a minute and think about.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, what were you going to say? You were going to talk a little bit about.
There's a couple of projects, large projects that have been recently. The first one in Lexington is the Tates Creek High School. That particular project is 358,000 gross square feet. Of that 358,000 gross square feet, about 50,000 of it was built out as a basement storm shelter. That was not academic spaces or anything like that. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. And of course, it's a 2,000 student high school as opposed to 1,350. But that one bid just recently, back in June, the base bid for that project came in at approximately $67.5 million. That equated to $189 a square foot for construction cost. And if you take the total project cost there, even with the alternates that were all accepted, that brought the price up to $71 million, the total project cost was $236 a square foot. So that was about a little over 9% lower than the estimate that was originally done on the project. If you look at a comparison to where we are with our numbers, so our numbers right now are approximately $240 a square foot for construction cost and roughly $290 total project cost. So there is, again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it's showing that the contractors that are bidding projects right now are being very aggressive because they're looking for security and they're looking for long-term commitments on large projects. So the other project that just recently bid, which was one of our projects, was phase 2 of Bowling Green High School, which included a classroom spaces. It also included an auditorium for 700. It included an auxiliary gym as well as a natatorium. That project was estimated at roughly $19.5 million, and it came in approximately 18% under that estimate. Again, because of the bidding environment out now. So, Ms. Springate, if you look at option number 1, and let's just talk base bid at this point in time, I mentioned that there were value engineering items that were not reflected in the cost. Neither were any reductions of the current bidding environment factored into the cost. But if you did run a scenario, and this is just a scenario, let's say out of the $3.5 million DE items that the board decides to take $2.5 million of those, and then if you take a conservative, what we feel like, the architects and the construction managers feel like is a conservative estimate on the savings based on the bid environment of a 6.5% decrease, that will take the base bid amount for option number 1 down to roughly $43.5 million total project cost. So that's just a scenario that shows what could happen. Of course, there's a lot that factors into that, the timing of when the project bids and the bid environment at that particular time. But so that's hopefully answers some of your questions.
Yeah. Well, just a couple things. Value engineering means that you're going to make cuts to the design that the steering committee and that you've presented to us as the design. Like, we talked about last time, like, the gravel parking lot, the shingle roof, those kinds of things, heat pumps, teacher stations. And so I guess my comment would just be that, for 2,000 students, I understand that's a few more than we have where, we are what you're building on is for 1,350. So I understand it's a little smaller, but it just seems like they're getting such a nicer building. They're getting so much more with what they're spending. Do both of the projects you mentioned, do they have a nickel to fund them? Is that how they're doing that?
Bowling Green does have a nickel. I guess I'm confused by your comment about what they're getting is so much nicer than what we're proposing.
Well, if they're getting a school for 2,000 students that's a $71 million facility, that sounds like really great. Like I know Frederick Douglass, was more than what we're looking at spending. You're saying about $43 million, we could get a partial school. I'm just looking at what other schools are getting. This wouldn't be a Great Crossings or something like they're building for Tate's Creek or Frederick Douglass. It sounds like if it's costing them that much more, it sounds like they would be getting, almost twice the school that we're going to be building. And I understand, funding is different and they have a couple hundred more students. But, this will be a school when it's built that Woodford County is going to have for years and years and years. We're not going to be able to, we should get the best school that we can possibly get. And if that means waiting until we have the funding, to me, that makes a lot more sense. So that's all I meant by my comment. And again, I think to say that, there's that list. Did you guys put that list of cuts up, Debbie? Cuts to the...
I'm not sure. I don't put things on the website. Did somebody get that up there?
Mr. Hawkins or Amy?
I thought you said you wanted to review that first, and so I didn't hear back after that meeting.
Okay.
We can certainly add that. I thought that was what you had said, Ms. Evelyn.
Thank you.
I guess the only comment I would make about the value engineering is that is what we gave to you was a incomplete process. It is not fully baked because it has not gone through the vetting process with board. The items that keep seem to be popping up here is gravel parking lots and things like that. Actually, gravel parking lots were listed, but if you'll notice, they were not even recommended by the design team to be talked about to the district. So I'm not exactly sure why that is something that keeps on coming up.
Well, it's something from the list, and again, we're talking about a school that's our dream school, but we're gonna have to value engineer, which means cut things that are in the design to be able to possibly afford a partial school. So that's my only concern. I just want us to have the best possible school, and I feel like if we need to wait to have the money to be able to do that, that's what we should do instead of just building something because we've got a little bit of money and we think we can make some cuts to get down to a school, and we hope that by the time we bid, the costs are lower. It just seems like a really odd way of going about, being professionals or doing, our business.
Debbie?
Kevin, I would say, it seems like, at least originally, before these bids started coming in a lot lower because of what I think we're all assuming is the bidding environment, that we actually had a higher square footage estimate than they did, even before the cuts. Am I right? Yeah. So, and is that because we're in Woodford and they're in Fayette, or is that because of what we were asking for, or is it just?
I think a lot of that has to do with us being conservative in our estimating, and I would ask, the construction manager go into a little bit more detail on that as well. But I think we're trying to be conservative.
So kind of raising it just to present the higher costs, whereas, and I think there has been a lot of confusion about the value adjustments. I think that probably that's something that we need to discuss at a meeting and make sure that we're all clear. Because, like Mr. Hawkins at one point presented a whole list of all of our expenses in our district. And it's hard. People get confused. Like, we were going to cut every expense. So, sometimes when we put things out there, it does need more context. And that's probably something we need to talk to in a meeting. So that everybody does understand the value adjustments, because I do believe there's a lot of confusion about that.
Miss Edelin, if I may, this is Sam. I'd like to.
Oh yes, welcome, Sam.
Let me make a real brief statement, if you will.
Absolutely.
Back in context to what was Springgate was talking about. There is considerable opinions, if you will, within a community. And we see this with every community we work in, both the design team and the architectural team. The problem is when you put a design up, everyone assumes that's exactly what they're getting. What that is a best case scenario of what the architect and the construction manager believes the board and the community is asking for. It is by no means set in stone that it will be built at $250 or $200 or $180 a square foot. The architect comes up with their best ideas based on what the community has asked them for, and then the design team, along with the construction management team, put our best guesses on what that cost will be. When we present that, and to Mr. Springgate's comment, value engineering does not mean cutting a project. Value engineering means figuring out ways, means, and methods of doing things that could be more cost effective. It could also mean, to use for instance, it could mean the difference between using, like what some of the schools use, a terrazzo tile throughout a school versus doing it in a hallway and going back to a LVT or a VCT vinyl in the floors. It could go from, for ceilings, it could go from a standard 2x2 reveal edge ceiling to putting in a 2x2 square edge. 90% of the people that see a school, they look up, they see a 2x2 ceiling, or they see a 2x4 ceiling. They have no idea that one of them is 10%, 15% more expensive. One has a little better architectural and aesthetic look. It lasts a little better because it's not as big a square. So those things by no way diminish the availability and the applicability of what the teachers will be teaching the students. So to say that one design or one school is better than another, I think, in my opinion, honestly, would be like saying that one school district's kids learns over another one because they had a teacher that was paid more than another. And I just don't agree with that. It goes to the quality, and Woodford County stands head and shoulders above the majority of this within this state, that they have some of the best teachers. They have great test scores. It really doesn't have anything to do with the money that Fayette County or Jefferson County spends. It has everything to do with the students and the teachers that's inside that building. But I do agree with Ms. Springate. Woodford County, the students and the residents, the teachers, the staff, they need the best building that they can get. But I would also tell you that holding out to be able to compare and get a building equivalent to some other school district will not raise your test scores one iota. It all comes down to the quality of the teachers and the students that's receiving that education. And you've already proven that your county has the teachers and the students to excel. Now, I think what I'm hearing is that the best for them is to get the best building they can. At this time, this has been your number one priority on your needs assessment for many, many years. And in all honesty, unless you just say from today on, we're not going to spend any more money until we have enough money for a high school, you're going to have many years of backed up things. So you must prioritize what you need, or that's the way I see it. We'll run any cost scenario you want. We'll do whatever in conjunction with Kevin, because we're here to serve the board and the citizens. And we want you to have the best school that you can get, the same as we do if it's in Eastern Kentucky, West Kentucky, or Central Kentucky. That's what we're here for. And it's nothing about any big eyes or little U's when it comes to how much a building costs.
Sam, I want to say amen to what you said. It's about the teachers, the programs, and the staff. And the only difference between our school and what other kids in Kentucky are getting is that they're getting an equalized school that's based on the nickel funding. And the difference is they're not dipping into their general fund and taking away from their teachers and their programs and their staff. And that has been my point all along. You're absolutely right. A school, you should not, if you have to choose between a building and your teachers and your programs, you should always pick your teachers and programs. And that is what I have been saying. So amen. Thank you.
But that's...
Thank you, Sam. But I would want to say that I just looked at the BG1 for Tate's Creek, and they're putting in 3.5 million of general fund. So it is not, sometimes you do supplement. So I don't think there's any hard or fast rules. Every district kind of looks and does what they can.
Ms. Evelyn, the other thing to keep in mind, and Kevin could talk more to this, which I've studied somewhat the plan on what Fayette County is doing just to be prepared to know what they was getting versus what's being proposed here. They had a considerable amount of space that is considerably less expensive to build than the instructional space that you have in this school, because they had such a big storm shelter area, open volumes, and they can come in cheaper. And that goes back, Ms. Springate, to your statement saying that it looks like they're getting twice the building than you're getting. The reason is they have so many open volume spaces that's much less costly to build. Plus, they put a considerable amount of storm shelter area in a basement that space has to be there. So the volume of the outside, the perimeters, the floors, the ceilings is there. The only thing they've got to pay for is a little bit up there in the middle. So that would also drive the cost down. Back to Ms. Evelyn, the one thing we didn't just take a conservative budget number and then add to it to be conservative. We also analyzed what is the space. Are there large volumes of air that doesn't cost as much? Or are they all standard classrooms with a lot of small spaces? You have to look at that also.
That's right. You have a efficient perimeter and efficient use.
The square footage of the building is not a total picture for what the project costs.
Absolutely. We have a lot of square footage in our current building that is absolutely zero use. So, All right, so since this is a public forum, I'm going to go on so we can make sure we get to all the questions. I think, can everybody see on their screen now the bonding capacity update? Everybody see that?
The world can't see it.
Okay, I'm going to assume yes. Baird ran these for us. We have not, we're not restricting the 600 anymore, so we didn't have as many scenarios. So these are the new numbers with no capital outlay, no general fund is 33.6. Everybody can read, but no general fund commitment, 80% capital outlay is 41.6 million. And then with the 350,000 general fund, 80% capital outlay, the bonding is at 47.2 million. And I think that's up from our last time she ran that. I know the interest rates have continued to go down, and that was, I think, kind of what she alluded to me. We just spoke briefly about this.
Debbie, can I just say something?
Absolutely. Can you speak really loud, Allison?
Yes, I would just like to request that moving forward in the meeting tonight, that we let each person who is speaking finish their comment or their questions before anyone overtalks them or interrupts. It seems to be repetitive that at least one board member speaks over everyone and they don't get to completely finish their question. So I think it would be beneficial to all of us if we wait until that person says, that I'm done, I've completed that, before we ask questions.
Okay, I agree, and I may be guilty of that because sometimes I just don't hear. So I think saying I'm done is a good idea. If I over talk you, everybody feel free to jump in when someone does that. Thank you, Allison. That's a very good point.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read these questions, and like I said, I'm going to read them verbatim, and then if anybody wants to jump in with an answer, feel free. So the first question comes from Sarah McCowan. Last June, a community forum was held to discuss hopes and dreams for a new high school. Beyond this meeting, how has the board involved the community in meaningful two-way communication about the design of the new high school? The majority, if not all, of the steering committee meetings were held at 4 p.m., which was not a convenient time for most people to attend. At the March 3rd forum, public comment was mentioned as an avenue for community input, but the board has failed to respond to any public comment over the last year. So I guess the question in this is, I'm looking for a question mark. How has the board involved the community in meaningful two-way communication about the design of the new high school? Does anybody want to jump in on that?
Chairwoman Evelyn, I'll be happy to try to answer this.
Okay.
Can I say beforehand that it's a pleasure to be with everybody this evening as we continue to discuss the possibility of the new high school. And I'd like to say with all sincerity, I hope that everybody watching tonight is well and safe during this very difficult time. During my tenure on the Board of Education, I can't recall of any subject that has received more public comment and has been discussed more publicly than the subject tonight. And this includes the time when I was chairman after the enaction of the Kentucky Education Reform Act, when everything changed. I think that our steering committee did a wonderful job. They provided valuable input to the design and appearance of our new high school and the functionality of it. It had 2 public members on there, board members, admin, administrative staff and teachers, and especially Ryan Alvey, our student input, who provided great input. When it comes to public involvement and public engagement, we had public and board member, we have had that probably at every regular meeting we've had this year. This has been the subject that has dominated board meetings. We conducted several evenings. We had public input to where we had large crowds who spoke their mind to us. I remember one where we had several board members who came with their insight and their experience, and I found that to be very, very helpful. And I've, received many emails, social media posts. I've read those, and I've attended meetings also where I could learn from our staff. Superintendent Hawkins made presentations at every school about the implications of the board's decision to move forward with this project, and I attended the meeting at the high school and at Northside. I spoke to the staff there. I asked if they had questions. I answered their questions. I asked for their suggestions. I took their suggestions, and I found that all to be very, very helpful to me. When I visited schools during the past year, I've had one-on-one conversations with folks there about this project, listening to them and trying to explain my position. Athletic events, extracurricular activities, I did the same. I've spoken with elected leaders in Midway and Versailles and the county about their thoughts and ideas on this, and I've given them mine. And I've had many conversations in my district of District 1, especially in my city of Midway, with my constituents while walking, going to the post office, drugstore, church, meetings. And this has been a topic of conversation many, many times. And I've appreciated all their input. I've appreciated their feedback and their suggestions. And I can assure, if you look at my comments during this period, my thoughts about funding have changed. My thoughts about the scope of the things have changed. And that, in large part, came from my one-on-one conversations with community members and listening to all of those who have come forth to share their feelings. So once again, I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
I would just say that I think the public has been crying out and begging for the board to have meaningful two-way conversations with them. We've seen the comments at every public meeting when we've allowed comments, but we failed to respond to them. We've seen, phone calls and social media posts and emails, and board members have been called out for failing to respond to those things. I think, the salient point is that the community is saying to us, do not restrict general fund dollars to build this partial high school. And it's just fallen on deaf ears. We had no public comment for the last meeting, yet we approved that $350,000 restriction. The public wasn't allowed to comment at that meeting. And I appreciate that we did schedule this virtual forum like I asked, but it's just not ideal. I mean, we all know that it's not ideal. So I think probably I would just apologize to the public that the board has made decisions and not considered the input from the public. I apologize to the public that the board has made decisions that has taken $350,000 out of general fund to restrict it for a new high school when we have all of these reentry expenses and issues coming up. I apologize that the board seems to be saying that a partial high school made of bricks is more important than our programs, our teachers, and our staff, and that money that could be utilized for those things, or even for teacher raises, that has not happened because we've set aside cash, we've set aside our capital outlay, and we've set aside general fund dollars. And I do appreciate Mr. Wilson, voting to unrestrict that $600,000 because I do think it helped our deficit. But the bottom line is we still have a deficit. We operated under a deficit budget, and after restricting this, it was 4 or 5 days till the fiscal year ended. We did this restriction and didn't even discuss with the public what that would mean. We've just failed to balance the budget and really just say that if we take this money from the general fund, that means we have to cut this, and this to balance, and we've just failed to do that. So I think I understand the frustration from the public, and I share that frustration. Dialogue has to be meaningful, it has to be two-way, and when you listen, you have to change your actions if what the other person is saying makes a lot of sense and in this case, what the public has been saying has made a lot of sense. Even after the last forum, we had a survey, and those results should have been released to the public. But out of 100% of the responses were release the general fund dollars.
Ms. Evelyn, I'd like to say something.
Yes, please.
It's confusing to me that such a small part of the town acts like they're the voice for everyone. Mainly they're residents of one neighborhood, one street. They've taken it upon themselves to force their voice on the entire county. They extend and as well as their extended families. They've bombarded the board with the same questions over the last year and a half. We have actually wasted a lot of taxpayers' money on forums and meetings. I mean, we've had meeting after meeting to address their questions. I don't think that at any point we're going to satisfy this specific group. I feel like that we need to move past this as a board and work together. I work hard to represent more than just one small area, one street, one group of people. My votes represent what I'm being told from many people across the county, not just a small group of people who have repeatedly come to our meetings over the last year and a half. I get emails from people from all over the county, people who are in my district, people who aren't, and I'm listening to them. So to say that, we haven't listened to our community, I do respect them coming to our meetings and making their voice be heard, but I also have to take into consideration the hundreds of other people who are contacting me on a daily basis, stopping me in the store, calling me on the phone, visiting my home. I have to respect the way they feel as well. So while, yes, there has been a group that's been vocal at all of our meetings, I think that we have to take in consideration the broad group of people who can't make it to our meetings, who can't leave their families at night, who don't email us 57 times a month. I'm not saying that that's a problem, but I'm saying that we have to take their opinions into consideration as well. So that's what I'd like to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question number 2. If an unforeseen, excuse me, if an unforeseen circumstance, such as a major system went out in a school, how would the situation be addressed financially? And this was sent in by Darlene Curry. First of all, Ms. Curry, great to hear from you. And I think this is an excellent question, something that as a district we have to consider. We do have more than one building, we have 6. So currently, with using capital outlay and $350,000 in general funds, which we just saw on the slide from Baird, we have $47.2 million in bonding. We also have around $1 million in our building fund. If we build a high school, it will take these amounts of money, depending on bids, alternates, the alternates we choose, etc. Each year, it is important to know that we do increase our bonding each year. I reached out to Baird. They kind of came up with a number for me around, I think it's conservative, but around $1 million, depending on enrollment and state funding provided, that increases each year with our bonding. So that, as we go through, that would be available. And we also currently have $736,000 in our capital outlay fund that can be used for construction projects. I'm not sure. I had asked for a facility inventory. I know we've done a lot of work on our buildings in the last few years. One of the biggest expenses that we have for buildings is HVAC systems. We completed that for Northside and Southside. Both Hometown and Simmons have gone through a major renovation in the last probably 15 years. The middle school, as unbelievable as it is 15 years old. So there could be large expenses for that. So this is a good question, and these are things we have to consider. And so other than the bonding increasing each year, and then even though we're using 80% of our capital outlay, there's still 20% of the capital outlay, which I believe is around, I'm not sure. And you might have to say every year that will also improve.
That's about 70,000.
And then we have a contingency as well. So Scott?
I said that's about 70,000,
Okay,
72,000.
okay. So it's built up to like 736,000, but that, the large part of that would probably be before we restricted the 80%. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this question?
Yeah, I would just say that this is a concern that I've brought up repeatedly. Our newest building is over 15 years old. And you know, these systems, major systems, roofs, that HVAC, they have a shelf life. So this is something I've asked for the board to discuss. I've asked these questions and we've never really answered. I asked for a SWOT analysis. I do believe this is something that we should put in writing and have a written financial plan that kind of looks at these things. Mr. Hawkins, could you or Amy speak to this question?
Well, it would depend on, obviously, the system itself that would need to be replaced. HVAC systems, I believe for the south side and north side were about 3.2 million between them. Obviously, if the middle school system were to fail, there would be several $1 million to have to replace. Roofs vary. For example, if the high school roof had to be replaced, it'd be about $1.5 million. So you get into some very large ticket items when you talk about major systems such as HVAC, roofs. I guess the other thing that would have to be considered, and Kevin may have to chime in on this, is that sometimes when you touch those, you also have to do some ADA upgrades if you're touching some parts of the building, and so that could add to cost if that were to be required as well. So that's not always the case, but there are some situations where you would have to make some ADA upgrades as well when you're touching the major systems.
Yes, like at the,
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say, like at the high school, we actually had to put in a chairlift in there for accessibility to the choir room. So there are ADA issues, you know, in some of the buildings. And then, Mr. Hawkins, you're correct. If you get into major renovations on existing buildings, especially, you know, for some of the older buildings, you would be required at that point in time to make ADA upgrades to the facility. So,
Anybody, Mr. Wilson or Ms. Richardson, did you want to chime in on this question?
Yes, ma'am. We just did the cooling tower at the high school. That's correct, right?
Yes.
And that's expected to last how long, roughly?
We hope about 20 years. The last one, I think, lasted about 22.
And how did we pay for that item?
I believe we used capital outlay for that.
Okay.
Amy would probably have to answer that if that's not right. While the cooling tower was replaced, the system itself is still 22 years old within that. So the cooling tower is a big portion of how the flow works, but the system itself within the building was part of the 96 renovation.
Okay, so I guess my next question is, if we decide to move forward, would you recommend then that we do a nickel tax, try for another nickel tax if we decide to move forward with trying to build high school? Because I know during the nickel tax debate, you were very adamant in the fact that we needed a new high school right now, that it was pretty much dire straits. That was what the community was told. So if we decide to move forward, are you strongly recommending a nickel tax?
I have not recommended that the board adopt a nickel. My position has been the nickel puts you in the best position to not only deal with your current needs, but also future needs. And I think if you look at the projects that Kevin referenced earlier, both of those districts do have nickels, and that was part of what allowed them to address those issues. Because I think the original Bowling Green High School was built around 1990, Kevin? Is that right?
actually, it was 1970. It was.
Oh, there. Okay. The gym was built in 90, wasn't it? When they added on to the gym.
The arena was built in '93, I think.
Okay. So, but again, both of those districts do have the nickel, which has put them in a position to deal with those needs as they've arisen.
And ask, how many nickels do we have right now?
We have two.
We have 2 nickels? Okay. Debbie, I'm done, thank you.
Okay,
If I could follow up, Debbie.
pardon?
Amy, could you or Scott explain the nickels that we have, if that's available funding to use for this new high school, or when that might be available? Because we know that all schools in Kentucky, since Kira, have funded their schools with a nickel. Could you just kind of go through that and explain that a little bit? When that might be available or possible to use as a funding source for a new high school?
Amy, you want to jump in?
Sure. So the current 2 nickels that we have, the last nickel that was passed, I believe we used it primarily to pay for the middle school. Is that not correct, Mr. Hawkins?
Correct.
And so
And the two
Huntertown
and the
renovation.
two
And Huntertown
renovations. Right.
So our bonding potential and the calculations that Kelly has been given us has been based on the current 2 nickels and our current bond embeddedness. So as she projects things into the future and she tells us what our bonding potential is, she is including the payments of those debt services throughout the future and how that impacts our current bonding potential as we stand now. So, ultimately, the nickels that we have been used to build prior buildings. And just to go back to Ms. Richardson's question a while ago, the cooling tower, we actually, we chose to pay for that towards the end of a fiscal year. We had monies left in our building fund, and that was paid out of building fund, not capital outlay or
Okay.
restricted dollars.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
Steve, I would like to add that I think the maintenance thing for that meeting and specifically said that the cooling tower with the new repairs was sound, that it was in good condition. I think I remember that correctly.
Yes,
Okay.
he said that was our best option at the time. But again, the overall system itself is still
Okay.
24 years old.
Okay, and then also, I think that Fayette County has a resolution that uses, I think it's $2.5 million in general fund money every year. And I think that they've used that since 2013. They spent roughly $4 million,
Right.
I think, on Creek, or $3.5 million from their general fund. Is that correct?
That's cash. That's not utilized for bond payments.
But that's not their general fund money?
Yes, it is general fund money, but it is only for cash. So it's used just one
I
time.
just want to make sure that the public knows that when Ms. Springate says that no other schools use general fund money to fund a school, that we are clear in the fact that some actually do.
Well, and just to clarify, Ms. Richardson, Amy can probably describe the situation better than I can, but setting aside cash for one-time things is completely different than setting aside your general fund cash for a reoccurring bond payment that you have to do for the next 20 years. Amy, if you could kind of clarify and then just give an idea of what that percentage is of our budget versus that percentage of Fayette budget is, and then just clarify that they are not using that for bonding, which is what we are doing. So we're not just setting it aside one time. That $350, once the bonds are sold, means that they will take that out every year for the next 20 years. So it really is $7 million commitment. But Amy, if you don't mind just kind of clarifying and explaining that to everyone, please.
Well, I have not done the math to calculate the percent of what Fayette County uses and sets aside for construction out of their general fund. I do agree, Ms. Springate, that it is being set aside to put cash towards projects and not a debt service payment. So that definitely is a difference. As far as our budget, it's a little the $350,000 is a little over 1% of our budget, and as you said, if that once a bond is sold, if that $350,000 is needed to make that bond payment, it could potentially be a 20-year requirement depending on future funding, what we get in SFPK, what our assessments are. So there's a lot of different factors that impact that. But again, that would be determined at the point that a bond was actually sold.
Okay, guys, I can't believe it's 7:30, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next questions to try to get through these. The question 3, this was a question for our bonding agent and for our architect. Can each of you share a ballpark figure of how much you will profit from the high school project? This question is from Candy Neal. Kevin, do you want to give us that? I think it's on the one, but do you want to go ahead and say?
Yeah, it is on the BG1, and I guess the question that I've got there is about profit. So a lot of these projects we break even, but the fee guidelines are regulated by KAR, 702 KAR 4160. And so those fee guidelines are what we are utilizing and every other architect in the state uses. It's currently set at 5.25% of the construction cost, and that total amount is $1,942,500. And let me just add that that's not just going to Ross Tarrant. We have quite a number of consultants that are working on this project, structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, a lot of different consultants. So there's a large group of people that fee is, supposed to cover.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, because Baird couldn't be here, they sent me a response. If we want to do it, we might have to do some math, but I'll try to, maybe we can get a ballpark figured out. So this is what Baird provided. Fees paid to Baird for the project are unknown until the bond issue has successfully sold and closed. Fees paid to the fiscal agent by a local board of education are outlined in 750 KAR 1010. The maximum fee for services and expenses of a fiscal agent shall be the highest amount according to the following schedule. There's a minimum fee of $7,500 for any amount of bonds issued. The next tier is $11 per $1,000 for the bond amount under $1 million. The next tier is $10 per $1,000 for the bond amount between $1 million and $2 million. And I will send this out, you guys. And
not to interrupt, but is this on the BG1? Could we look there and get it?
You know what? Maybe it is. I don't have the big one in front of me.
Because I can't do that.
Right. I do want to say, so they do not get paid until the bond is issued. So they don't get paid anything yet. What we pay them includes attorney fees, printing of bonds and official statements, advertising the bond issue, travel of the fiscal agent, and other normal expenses related to the bond closing. And does not include a title search or rating service. The bond counsel fees, so the attorney fees and legal expenses typically account for 18 to 20% of the total that the fiscal agent receives. And again, they have received nothing to date and will not until we actually sell a bond. I don't have that BG1 in front of me. It seems to me it's all based on what the final sale is. So
I have the BG1 in front of me. And the fiscal agent fee is estimated at $228,000
on a $45 million.
$45 million. Well, that's the BG1.
Yeah, but the bond sale may not be the whole amount if we use cash.
Correct. The bond sale is $44 million at this point estimated.
Yeah. Okay. And so that would change, like, depending on what the bond is. It's not the total cost of the project, like the architect fee, is what the actual bond sale is.
Correct.
Okay, so we can try to get that up a little better, maybe a real ballpark, but they're precise. So, okay, the question 4. Has any member or members of the Woodford County Board of Education received any gifts in kind, including meals, gifts, tickets to sporting events, etc., from either of your firms or you personally, or any member of your firm? If so, will you please disclose who and what they received? Candy Neal. Kevin, do you want to respond to this?
Yes, so back in October 9th of 2019, I took 2 board members to lunch at Ricardo's. It cost $57.65 for 4 of us. And that was the only instance that I'm aware of that we have done anything like that for a Woodford County board member.
Okay. And I will say that was for me and Ms. Bradley. Okay, this is the answer from Baird. And get ready again, you guys, because they are very thorough. As a municipal advisor, Baird is required to comply with the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB rules. One such rule, MSRB Rules G20, governs gifts and entertainment expenses of municipal advisors related to the municipal securities business. Under MSRB Rule G20, neither Baird nor any of its associates are permitted to directly or indirectly or give or permit to be given anything of service or value, including of gratuities, in excess of $100 per year to any person, if such payments or services are in relation to the municipal securities business of Baird. No gifts of any value may be given or received without receiving prior approval from the compliance department. This $100 limit applies to the total amount that may be given per year, and all gifts given to any individual by Baird or Baird Associates must be totaled to ensure that the firm limit is not violated. MSRB G20 does not prohibit occasional gifts of meals or tickets to theatrical, sporting, and other entertainment, the sponsoring of legitimate business functions that are recognized by the Internal Revenue Service as deductible business expenses, or gifts of reminder advertising, provided that the associate is in attendance and that such gifts shall not be so frequent or so expensive as to raise a suggestion of conduct inconsistent with the high standards of professional ethics in the securities industry. Okay, Baird has paid for lunches for Mr. Wilson, Ms. Elin, and Ms. Bradley. As of October 19, 2019, Hilliard Lyons merged with Baird. Prior to the merger and under Hilliard's compliance guidelines and procedures, Hilliard hosted Mr. Hawkins for a golf outing and Mr. Wilson at a basketball game. Baird has policies and procedures in place to monitor compliance with MSRB Rule G20, and to the best of our knowledge, Baird and its associates are in compliance with MSRB Rule G20. Okay, so that's their answer. Question 5.
Hold on. I think Allison wanted to say something.
Okay, go ahead, Allison.
I have a question on this.
Okay.
How much the lunch was that they supplied to? Did you say it was you and Miss Bradley?
I'll have to get that from them. I know it was probably about $15.
A person.
Yeah.
Okay, and where was the golf trip that was taken? Where was that?
I'm not sure.
Was that at Valhalla Golf Course? And then there was, beyond that, I believe, there was lunch as well as a trip to, I'm not sure what's golfing because I don't golf, but there's a pro shop or a lunch area, a hangout area for golfers. Because
I'm not sure. We'd have to ask them for more detail.
I'll be happy to address that.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson, who is a member of Baird's team, I've known him for about 20 years, going back to time before I was a superintendent here, when he was in Grayson County and I was in Davis County. So we played golf on many occasions. During that time, he called me, asked me if I'd like to play. I did it on a day when there were no students. I took a non-contract day. I specifically asked Mr. Anderson if he was a personal member at Valhalla. and he was. It was not through a Baird membership. And so he allowed me to actually bring a friend. So I assumed it was golf with friends. I was shocked when I saw that it had been turned in as a business expense today, because that was never mentioned. We never discussed anything related to our bonding or a project with the district while we played that day. I actually called Mr. Anderson today and asked him if he would provide a statement stating that he had asked me to play and that we did not discuss that. He checked with Chip, and Chip said that would not be allowed. So again, I was shocked to find that it was a business expense, because my friendship with Mr. Anderson goes back 20 years. And when he called and asked me to play, I assumed it was golf with friends.
I appreciate that. I understand that. I understand that you might have misunderstood that, but you were.
I did not have lunch. I did not have lunch. No.
Can you give us a rough estimate on what that bill was?
I
think we can.
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know how much a round of golf or lunch or.
I didn't have lunch. So.
But they turned it in as an expense for you, as well as your friend that you took.
Yes.
I mean, this is all news to me. I didn't know this, so I'm just trying to make sure that I get all the information.
It was new to me too, because I had no idea that it was turned in that way.
Okay.
So when I found out today, I immediately called Barry and I said, Barry, I had no idea.
Right.
Because again, I've known him for nearly 20 years.
Okay, I appreciate it, but we can probably get that expense as well. I appreciate that, Scott. Thank you.
And this is Barry. Debbie, I just wanted to chime in and say I did not go to lunch or do anything with anyone, but it sounds like from what Baird is reporting and what Mr. Locke is reporting is that these things are governed and there are rules about limits, and it doesn't sound to me like anybody in Woodford County, any board members, did anything improper, or the superintendent did anything improper, just based on what you read tonight. And again, this is the first time I'm hearing this too.
Right, and I think
say that publicly.
the situation with Baird is they're governed by the security management. So, they have lots stricter rules than even Covenant. And so there's a lot of that going on. Okay, question. Oh, I'm sorry, Allison, go ahead.
That's okay. I just want to say one more thing, that I appreciate Ms. Neal's question. It is a legitimate question. And as long as, I know that as far as in real estate, we're only allowed to do a certain amount of incentives, gifts, whatever. So as long as none of this went over $100, there weren't any violations made. But as a board member, I would like to be able to see those amounts and what Baird turned in as an expense, just for everything that they did. If I could get, if the whole board could get a summary of those costs, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we ready for question 5? I'm afraid we're going to run out of time again. All right. What is the board's plan to eliminate current deficits incurred in 2019-20 prior to a new board taking office January 1st, 2021? And this question has been submitted by Letha Reed. I will say it's been confusing what our deficit's going to be. We've had different amounts that, we're going to go in the hole $1 million or whatever. It seems like the last thing I saw from Mr. Hawkins that our revenues our expenses exceeded our revenues by $200,000 to $250,000 this year. At this point, the amount will come out of contingency. Mr. Hawkins did identify $240,000 cuts in expenses and an additional $60,000 in savings from insurance and retirement waiver from the state in February. But then subsequently, after the pandemic hit, the board opted to assign those savings from covering the deficit to paying expenses related to COVID. To date, we have received $483,000 from CARES Act and may receive more from the GEARS, a state program. In addition, there is FEMA money that may be available to reimburse some of our COVID expenses. And as such, those savings would not need to go to COVID expenses and may be able to cover the deficit. Does anybody else have any weigh in on this question?
This is Sherry. I would just say that we need to ask those questions before we expend funds. That, you know, the budget is something we need to make sure that is balanced and that we're in the best position possible. And I know Mr. Hawkins and Amy, you know, have recommended that we not restrict any general fund dollars, especially in light of this pandemic. And I do believe it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we balance the budget and that we don't have deficit spending moving forward, because that's not fair to dump that onto a new board. So that's all I would say.
Okay, thank you. And, Allison or Amber, do you have anything you want to weigh in on?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. She said no, right?
Yes, no, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Question 6, please explain why this Board of Education does not want to and/or feel the need to wait until after the pandemic to make decisions on financing the new high school given the economic unknowns we are currently facing. This question was submitted by Debbie Spears. Sherry, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I would just say that I think she's correct. I do think just common sense and any fiscally responsible person would say that you need to wait and see what's going to happen with this pandemic. I know Mr. Hawkins and Amy have advocated for that. There's just so many unknowns out there to spend general fund money and the cash that we have to set it aside for a partial high school really, you know, just doesn't seem to be very, very responsive or responsible.
Anyone else? Okay, well, I'll say that until we sell bonds, we can still unrestrict the $350,000. Until bids are procured, and as Kevin has explained to us tonight, it seems to be a very positive environment because of our bad situation. That's a little bit of a silver lining on a very bad situation, but it is a favorable environment for bidding. So we won't know the benefit derived in the construction costs from this downturn in the economy. There are many other unknowns at this point. What is known is that the high school is the #1 need for our students on the facility plan, which was developed through a committee of parents, community members. It's a long process. Anyone who's served on it, it's very well represented. And you know, the thing is, it's also the most expensive thing we'll ever build, so it's always going to be a shock to the system. It may turn out that we can't do it when some of these unknowns become known, but I, for one, am proud that we have moved the ball down the field. This project has been wanted since the 90s, been put on the back burner. The next board will have a design, they will have hours and months of work that has been done that they can pick up and run with. And again, until bonds are sold, the money can be unrestricted. All right, question 7. Given the economic uncertainties in the coming year due to the pandemic, why did the board restrict $350,000 instead of completely eliminating the deficit for the 2019-2020 fiscal year? And this question was submitted by Gabe Fugate. I guess I would just say that I kind of repeat pretty much what I said in the last one. I think these questions are similar. We can still unrestrict the $350 until the bonds are sold. We'll have more surety. We'll know more about some of these unknowns, including our financial position. Again, the deficit's kind of been a moving target with projections. We've been told we're in very dire circumstances, but then also that we would not take a tax increase, which I think everybody understands. To not take the 4% has a much more detrimental effect on our general fund over the years than to take the 4% and restrict part of it. So again, I would just say until the bonds are sold, that we can still unrestrict this. As we move forward in this ever-changing environment, we'll know more, and this is not something that we cannot undo until the bonds are sold. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Sherry. I would just say that we're expending hundreds of thousands of dollars towards this project. And really, that's money that could be better spent on reentry with the COVID. It's money that could be better spent on our staff and on our programs. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but on the other hand, instead of buying, water fountains and doing the capital outlay project that was recommended by Mr. Hawkins and Amy, we decided to set that money aside. So I appreciate that until bonds are sold, we can hop out of this. But on the other hand, we're having some pretty large expenditures. And then the other thing that I would say is just that I do think that, the board needs to have a good handle on the deficits this restriction caused. We approved this 6 days before the end of the 1920 fiscal year, and we really didn't discuss the budget at that meeting at all. We didn't discuss the circumstances or the consequences of this action. And I really just continue to be concerned about the idea that we would take money from the general fund and set it aside for a partial high school, causing deficit spending. The general fund dollars are meant to be spent on your staff, your programs, your electric bill, the daily operations of your district. And so to take this money out of our contingency last year, which is supposed to be our emergency fund if we have an emergency, it's not an emergency if you're just being a poor budgeter and you're taking money out of your contingency or savings year after year after year. And so to do that, and then I think we would have to do that again this year, if I'm not mistaken. Amy, you can kind of weigh in on that. But I just think that, it's really important to be fiscally responsible. I think everybody does want a high school. I was on the district facilities committee. We want a high school. I want a high school. I just don't want to get a high school at the cost of cutting programs, at the cost of teacher raises, at the cost of, being a school that really the heart and soul is about, like Sam said earlier, your people, your staff, your programs. And so if we had money for both, I wouldn't be having this conversation. We don't have money for both. We're taking from one, which is our people and our staff and our students and our classrooms, to fund the other. And so that's my problem.
Okay, anybody else? So that was question 7, right? Yes, okay. Question 8. At the June 15, 2020 board meeting, it was stated more than once a new board would make final decisions regarding bids and future restrictions. If it is the current board's intention to leave the financing to the new board, then why not also allow them to make decisions related to the design? And this question was submitted by Jeff Reed. Does anybody want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I would.
Yes, please.
I would just like to say that, if you look at the way that the board is elected, we had 2 seats voted in a year and a half ago. We've got 3 seats getting ready to be voted in this coming year. I think that, I think that we go in realizing that we're going to make decisions that a future board is going to have to deal with. And I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone if you look at the way that our seats are voted in. So while I understand that maybe a new board coming in doesn't think that it's ideal what the previous board voted on, I think that's a part of what we do. I mean, we are making decisions for here and now. We can't sit and wait because we know that 3 new board members are coming in. We have to make decisions and expect them to come in and work with them as well. And whether they agree with the decisions that we've made or they don't, they have a vote. And I think that's part of what this is and part of what makes it so wonderful. So, saying that the decisions we make now affect another board, I realize that they do, but I also realize that once they are seated, we get to take their input as well. It's a process, and it's a never-ending process, the way 5 seats are voted in and out. I'm done. Thank you.
This is Sherry. I would say that having the staggered seats is a great system and it does work well. But to his question, really, if we're saying we're going to set aside the money and do the BG1, but we're not going to sell the bonds, we're not going to move forward in any way with the project until January, I do understand his point. And it does make sense that if you're going to say, new board, you get to decide if we move forward with this, but we'll have made all the decisions up until then, or we'll have tied you or locked you into certain things. It is problematic. But again, the new board can decide, to totally scrap things or go in a total different direction. With the majority of votes, they can decide, the direction of this in January. So.
Sherry, I don't disagree with you at all on that. I actually agree with you. I think that I agree. I think it's a great process. So, they can move forward with that. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
And I guess I would just say that, it does seem to make sense, but we've had a lot of effort and resources put into this. And again, there is turnover on the board. This is a long project. We've made it probably longer than usual, but 2 to 3 years is not unusual. And you're going to have elections somewhere in there because some of us at least are up every 2 years. And I would also say that, the new board in place is going to have a lot of input. There's still going to be tons of decisions to be made as far as alternates and finishes and things like that. So, I just think it's part of the, just part of the way it's handled. So, anyone else on question 8? All right, question 9. Over the last 2 years, nearly every Woodford County School Board meeting that has allowed public comment has been dominated by citizens of Woodford County and even former board members stating that restricting general funds to build a new high school is a very bad idea. The Woodford County School Board held a public forum where 100% of the respondents on a survey about funding options for a new high school said that restricting general funds to build a new high school is a very bad idea. Many members of the community have emailed their school board representatives telling them that they think that restricting general funds to build a new high school is a bad idea. Though, through all of the public concern over the funding methods of the new high school, the Woodford County School Board continues to bullishly push forward. How can the citizens of Woodford County voice their opinion about funding for a new high school and not feel like it is falling on deaf ears that are set on pushing a personal agenda? That was submitted by Jeremy Reynolds. Anybody?
I think Allison's talking. She's on mute though.
Yes. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
First of all, I want to say I don't think that any of the 5 of us, myself, Miss Evelyn, Ambrose, Danny, Sherry, I don't think that any of us have a personal agenda. I don't think that any of us would take our time away from our families to do this based on a personal agenda. We do spend a lot of our private time working on this. Yes, we signed up to do this. I'm not being arrogant in my statement. I'm being very sincere. But I would like to say that in February, I also did a poll. And I posted a poll on social media site on Facebook. If you'll give me a second, I'm going to pull that up. I gave 3 options, and I understand that it doesn't matter what options we give. We're never going to satisfy the entire community. We're never going to satisfy everyone. I think that all 5 of us have the intention to reach the community, to try to get community input, but we can't do it perfect. That's just the way things are. But I did put a poll out on Voices Over Sales, and this poll reached 12,000 members of our community. And I think that their voices should be heard. I think that they are legitimate. I think that they are honest. I gave 3 options in my poll. While they may not have suited everyone, I did my very best. I had good intentions on putting these polls out as an honest poll for me to be able to hear from my constituents and get feedback from everyone. So my poll had 3 options. One was we currently have restricted money from part of the last 2 tax increases. Of course, this was before we unrestricted the $650,000, so I understand that that's changed now, and it's also before COVID. But so was Mr. Hawkins' poll, so I want to make sure that everybody knows that I understand that, and I'm not discounting his poll at all. I just want to make sure that my poll is heard as well. So number 1 was we currently have restricted money from part of the last 2 tax raises. This is enough to build a complete high school, but will require some cuts to the current budget. continue with this and find ways to trim $45 million budget and move forward with the new high school. Just like a home budget, we should have to think differently to get our kids and teachers what they deserve with the least impact to our classroom. That was number one. Number two, try another nickel tax. It's important to know that money from the nickel tax can be used for building, not teacher raises, not general expenses. So the superintendent will likely still recommend the 4% increase or tax increase. The Board of Education was informed in an open meeting that the petition committee is ready to form and fight another tax. And as far as I know, I haven't heard from them, but as far as I know, the petition committee is still intact, minus myself, obviously, because I'm on the board, but they are still ready to fight that. Number three was unrestrict the money and continue the current path in spending, take 4% hike every year, and not build a new high school in the near future. And I asked each member of that page, which is actually over 12,000 members of our community, to respond. My results were well over 200 people voted for option one. There were over 20 people who were interested in option two, and 5 people were interested in option 5. So the way I read that, and I could be wrong, but the way I took that is that the majority of, and I might also add that there were over 650 comments on that post, so we did reach a very large amount of people. The way I read that is that the majority of the people who responded to that poll would choose option one, which was we currently have restricted money in a part of the 2% tax increase, or the 2 tax increases. This is enough to build a complete high school, but it will require some cuts to our current budget. Continue with this and find ways to trim our budget and move forward with a new high school. I'm not saying that is the where's all ends all. I just want to make sure that everyone on the board and our community realizes that I did reach out to over 12,000 people where they had free reign to comment what their opinion was. And they did. Over 600 people, it was over 650 people actually, commented and put their opinion on this poll. So I feel like that, if you combine that and Mr. Hawkins' poll that he did at our meeting, I think we can get a pretty good handle on what our community feels. I just feel like that we've reached a greater amount of people with his and mine combined. So that's pretty much what I have to say to Mr. Reynolds. I hope he understands what I'm saying.
Thank you, Allison. Anyone else?
Debbie, your picture went away.
Oh. Sorry.
Okay. This is Sherry. I would just say that I understand, his frustration and what he's saying. And I appreciate, Allison, that you reached out to folks and did a poll on social media. I just worry that of course, some polls are more scientific than others. But I also just kind of worry about, the first question, was saying that we, and I know the money's changed and things have changed, but it was saying that we could build a high school, a full high school, and we clearly can't and couldn't. And so I think, people's feelings about a partial high school are different than about a full high school. And, the monies have changed, the amounts have changed, but I think just the general sentiment of using general fund money, taking that money away from the students in the classroom and using it for a building really kind of gets to the heart of what he's talking about. And so I appreciate his comments too.
Mr. Wilson, do you have anything?
No, I think I answered some of his question in the first question when he talks about deaf ears, my feelings, et cetera. So I think I addressed some of his comments in my first answer.
I really don't have anything other than stating the obvious, which is we don't have personal agendas here. This high school is not going to benefit my children. It's certainly caused me a lot of consternation and stress, and we don't get paid a lot. We're doing it for the kids. And if that's a personal agenda, I think we're all proud it, including the writers of these questions. So I just think using terms like personal agenda, again, are not, I don't know, I do have a personal agenda, and that is to help the kids of this district get the best education possible. All right, question 10. We are fortunate that our students have not yet felt a significant impact from the restrictions of general funds for a new high school because the district had a significant contingency fund. What is the plan a few years down the road when this decision can no longer be propped up by the contingency fund because it has been depleted? Again, this is by submitted by Jeremy Reynolds.
This is Sherry. I would just say that really that is one of my big concerns. When you run a budget, obviously you're dipping into your contingency to cover costs. And again, that contingency, Amy, you feel free to chime in, but my understanding from what's told us through the years is supposed to be our emergency fund, that if we have a major system go out, that we can kind of cover that. Or, if we, need to cover, like, some of these COVID expenses that we weren't really expecting, kind of one-time emergency. And to use that just as a month after month after month, kind of, piggy bank or savings account is just not what the contingency is meant for. So I absolutely share his concerns there.
Ms. Eden,
Oh, go ahead.
I believe that each year historically we have had new revenue through various sources, distilled spirits, increased assessments, new construction. So I do believe that there will be new funds coming in this year, and I think that if you look at, we know we will have 2 new board members in January, possibly 3. In July, this time next year in July, we may have a new superintendent, and I think with a lot of the groundwork that we have done, and then fresh eyes on everything, I think that you will see the picture will be much brighter.
Debbie, this is Sherry. I just wanted to see if Amy could kind of clarify about the contingency and the trend of that for the past 2 years and what you expect to see this year. And then also just what you expect to see with just the general budget, given the, I don't know if we want to call it a, economic crisis or a recession or a depression. But if you could just kind of chime in on the trends of the contingency and if you expect us to have any to contribute this year, and then also the fiscal outlook.
So up until FY19, we had, in my tenure, we had not operated on any deficit. We did last year. This year, I just looked at it a few minutes ago, and what I had given you all earlier, I'm still estimating in that, 200 to 250,000 potential deficit for this year. I know that it's July, but there are still several things that are that take place in the first 2 to 3 weeks of July that directly impact the prior fiscal year. Monies are collected at different, motor vehicles. They're collected in June and given to us in July. So there's a little bit of lag time on several, not only revenues but expenditures. So we're still working through all of that. And but again, a estimate would still be in that $200,000 to $250,000 range. You're asking about the future. We're in a situation that no one has seen this type of pandemic since 1918, and that's a different world. I cannot project what is going to happen over the next year. That's why we are trying to be very conservative and cautious, and that's just it. Unfortunately, the way that we are funded through the state, and I have said this many times, we are given what our state revenue is going to be. I've received an estimate for our FY21, but I will not know that number until April of 2021. So 1 month before we get out of school is when I find out how much money we're actually going to get. So it's very challenging, very difficult. I do the very best that I can, and unfortunately, I cannot give you the answer to that specific question about what's going to happen in the future. What I've given you is based on historical situations, but we're dealing with something we've never dealt with before. So, what I've given you is the best of my ability to give you. And I don't know that anyone on earth really knows exactly what's going to happen.
Thank you, Amy. I think you've done a fabulous job. I know you're always within, 0.5% or 1%, ever since I've been on the board with your guesstimates and then the actual, what the budget actually comes out at the end of the year. I just think the governor and, really KSBA, everybody has been real clear that we're going to have probably some cuts. You and Scott have been clear that that's probably in our future just based on, the revenue that the state has been down, and the revenue that, the federal government. So thank you for that.
Okay, can I move on to number 11?
Please.
I'd like to ask that the board consider all options available at this point, remembering that one option is to stop and revisit a new building in the future. As a Woodford graduate, parent, and community member, I would much prefer to wait for the building our community deserves, even if that means my own children will graduate from the current building. In the last meeting, I heard many comments about cutting corners to make a new building more affordable. Previously, the feedback from WCHS staff was that they wanted a complete building. All of the public comments from recent meetings called for putting all of the restricted money back in the general fund. At a recent meeting, a board member stated that nothing had changed, that the community wants a new school. I agree that we want a new school. However, most of us understand what COVID-19 has done to the financial well-being of families and businesses. We also understand the impact of this is not over yet. I urge you to poll the community on what they want now. The district did a great job of polling parents about their wishes for reopening in the fall. Why can't the board do the same with the community? I believe many are willing to wait for a time when a respectable building can be afforded without cuts to existing programming, especially given the current issues facing the district with COVID-19. Has the board considered waiting at least to see what the impact of the inevitable loss of student, I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush. Has the board considered waiting to at least see what the impact of the inevitable loss of students to homeschool this year will be? Public schools across the nation are bracing for this impact while our board continues forging through with a building we cannot afford. Please listen to the community. All of the recent feedback on board meetings has said to wait. Please poll the community and consider their wishes for restricting all funds and opting to wait. And this was submitted by Leslie Gilpin. I'm just going to say we've made great progress on this project. We have invested money and time in coming up with an excellent design for a high school. I think it is an excellent design. I know you doubt my word, many people do on that subject. So I encourage you to talk to Mayor Troggett, our architect, or Jimmy Grimm on their view of the process and the resulting design. And if you contact me, I know Mayor Troggett's very available, but I can get you the information on the other two people. I do not believe that this is a second-rate effort. I think that narrative has been driven hard, but while this may not be the Taj Mahal that Frederick Douglass High School is, it is totally in line with the other excellent buildings that we have in this district. And when we talk about what our kids deserve and what's important, and when we in a building, I'm not sure that it is important to spend all those extra monies for a lot of bling that doesn't really contribute to the educational process. So I think it's a wonderful design and will be something that the community can be proud of. And again, I'm going to say, until the bonds are sold, nothing is in stone. Much will happen between now and that date, which I believe will, and between the date that we can bid, and I believe that the possibility of bidding will not happen any earlier than late next winter or spring. Anyone else?
Larry. I would just say thank you for your comments. And I do think that we should have a survey. I think that's something we should agree to do. It's a very valid point. We survey about a lot of different things. And so, this would really kind of get to the heart of where we are now, what we can afford now, what's going on now, and be very recent. So I would ask that we all agree to do a survey, and I'd be happy to work with Mr. Hawkins or Amy or whoever,
Yeah, and I think those questions on surveys, the survey is only as good as the questions. So I think if you want to get a good draft going, we could look at it. Anybody else before I go into question 12? I don't mean to rush, but I'm kind of hoping we get them all in. So, okay, question 12. Being an elected official generally indicates that you are considered worthy of the public trust. However, I expect that your respective constituents are now as disgusted as I am in the way you as a governing body conduct yourselves. You are betraying the public trust when you willfully continue to pursue a project to which a majority have expressed their objection. Since you have not yet made public the results of your survey of public support, I did an informal limited survey myself, which did not elicit a single response in favor of funding a new high school at this time. In the midst of this pandemic, your creative financial ideas demonstrate very poor leadership in failing to address the increased funding that will be needed to facilitate a return to school at this time. You have chosen not to fully disclose the process by which you decided to commit a substantial sum of taxpayers' money to subsidize the design for a project which did not have full community support. Your lack of transparency implies that you have something to hide about how your decision was influenced. Your actions are widely perceived as underhanded and corrupt. How do you intend to address this? And this was submitted by Jerry Isaacs. I'm going to respond to this first. This is an inflammatory rant, veiled as a question, and is full of the type of rhetoric that divides us and does not help one child in Woodford County. It's sad that we've come to this, and generally I would not respond to such a remark. However, I cannot let the charge stand that me or any of my fellow board members has acted in an underhanded or corrupt manner. Every decision made was made in public meeting. Some may not like the decision and have continued to fight against it. And that's fine when the arguments pertain to the subject matter at hand. Unfortunately, though, the tactics have turned to personal attacks on social media and beyond. They have not only been directed at individual board members, but also have been aimed at board members' children. Totally unfounded allegations have been made as to how the board conducts its business. Now it appears that the tactic of some will be to elevate the attack to alleged corruption. I categorically deny that I, or to my knowledge, any of my wonderful fellow board members have acted in a corrupt or underhanded manner. And I implore the adults in our community to remember that we are community and behave in a manner worthy of Woodford County.
Debbie, I appreciate your statement. I second that. I do not think that any of our board members have a personal agenda that we are corrupt, that we are trying to not be transparent in our actions. I think that we have sat and listened to public comment. We have discussed on multiple occasions in lengthy discussions the decisions that we've made. And I think that we have made, each of us, myself and all of our 5 board members, have made our decisions based on what we've heard from our constituents. I think that we've made them to the best of our knowledge. And yes, I agree that we have been attacked, our children as well. It comes to a point where you don't want to respond to these kind of questions because it's not productive. It's not moving us forward. And it causes a divide between a board who we already have different opinions, But I feel like that all 5 of us do try to work together, and I think that puts a wedge in the process that we're making. So I appreciate your comment. I think that as a board, we all stand together in the fact that we do try to work together, even though sometimes we disagree and we disagree strongly. But we were elected to make these decisions to the best that we can, and we're not perfect. We don't pretend to be perfect. So I appreciate your comment. I appreciate your response to that question.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Allison. Does anyone else have anything to answer or say?
This is Sherry. I think that it's undeniable that there are issues with this board. I just think that's undeniable. And I think that, one way of making things better, one way of addressing things is that we have to be transparent. We have to allow public comment at meetings, not just, the meeting we had yesterday, but at every meeting. And I know we talked about that a little bit, yesterday, and I requested that public comment be put on every single agenda. That's something we should do to be transparent. And I definitely think that training and some, board team building and just some general training about our roles, our responsibilities, about ethics, about, micromanaging, about, our role with the day-to-day operations of the district. And really, some social media training too. I feel like if we could move forward and really address some of these issues, I think it is harsh. Some of the things that are said and have been said, not just tonight, but over this past year and a half are harsh. And I do think it's incumbent upon us not to just dismiss people, but to say, what can we do to address these concerns? These are issues that come up over and over again with multiple people. And I feel like we could address some of these with some training. We could address some of these with, some policies and with following our policies and our procedures.
I guess this question was more about, are we going to, okay. I just wanted to respond that we're not corrupt. I was standing up for all of you.
I
just texted Grant to see if we're allowed to go over the advertised time, and he hasn't gotten back to me.
I asked him to text on Debbie, and he said it was fine. But I do get your point, and I'm ready to move on. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So he did. 1 minute, Allison. So, Sherry, you heard back from Grant that it was okay to go over the advertised time?
I was in the meeting last night, and I said, it's 9:00, Grant. Is it okay if we go beyond the meeting time? Because I just wanted to make sure.
Right.
I didn't end the meeting early. I just wanted to be clear about, since he was there and we were paying him, I wanted to ask the question. And he said that he thought it would be just fine. It's basically the start of the meeting that you have to make sure you're real clear about. But we can go over. But I'm going to stop talking so we can get through these.
Allison, you did have something else to say.
Yes, I just have one more quick question. I'd like to ask Scott a question if I could.
Scott?
Yes,
Allison wanted to ask you a question. Did you hear that?
I'm right here.
Mr. Hawkins, I would like to ask you, do you feel like that yourself or the board is corrupt?
Am I corrupt? No.
Yourself or the board?
I don't know that I would use the word corrupt. No.
How would you describe your feeling about the board? If you don't think that we're corrupt?
I think there is a concern with some transparency on some decisions.
So are you saying that you think that certain board members work together to make decisions?
I'm just saying I believe that there has not been full transparency on some decisions.
Okay. This is another subject besides high school funding. So thank you for that question, Allison, though. It was very illuminating. But let's try to, I think there's probably concerns on both sides, but let's try to get through these questions and stick to the high school funding. But Allison, I appreciate you asking that question because it's important and it may be the heart of a lot of things. Okay, Allison, she gone?
Keep going.
She's on mute.
Okay.
I'm okay. I'm good. Go ahead.
Are you okay if I move on?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. Question 13. I can teach you neither arithmetic nor leadership skills in 3 minutes time, but I can tell you this. It's never a good idea to give bricks and mortar priority over human beings. Because some of you seem to have been spared the ravages of intellect, I want to make it clear to you what is obvious to many others. The excellent academic performance of our students has not been impaired by an ugly building. It is rather a result of people, teachers, assistants, administrators, support staff who are part of the reason for their success. If additional funding is freed up by correcting your past ill-considered decisions and does become available, these people should be the recipients. If you choose to act with wisdom and free up general funds for this general good instead of applying them to advance your personal agendas, how do you intend to use it? Again, this was submitted by Jerry Isaacs. I'm going to answer this. This question is phrased in the same vein as the last one. But I will respond by stating that the high school building is not just bricks and mortar. It affects the everyday lives of the human beings inside it in critical ways. We have over 30 exits and entrances to that building. It was built in a time when openness was valued. Sadly, we are not in that world today, and these entrances have become a liability. It is impossible to adequately defend our children there. If you are staff or student and need an elevator, you must make the trek to the back of the building. Perhaps this does not affect you, but we must think of all of the human beings inside of our buildings. New functioning bathrooms for all of our students and staff have a positive and critical impact on the lives of those that utilize the building. We know in our new world that this is an issue that we must address to make all of our students comfortable in their school building. The stairwells are so narrow that it is worrisome what would happen in an emergency. Our fine arts students and staff have totally inadequate facilities. The band room is out of compliance with current standards because the ceiling is so low. It no longer meets compliance for noise levels. There is not adequate space for our music and theater students. While your children may not participate in these activities, hundreds in our school do. Music and the arts is proven to improve the learning of students. It also often leads to participation in valuable extracurricular activities. In addition to band, we are fortunate to have an orchestra. However, the room they share with the band floods often, creating risk to the environment of the room and equipment. The science facilities have none of the modern equipment or environments that our students will encounter when they go out to the world. We have science teachers with postgraduate degrees, including a PhD, who cannot share with our students the benefits of their talents because of lack of facilities. Our students sit in crowded, noisy hallways to collaborate or make up work because there are no appropriate spaces for these activities. Another experience that is considered essential for the education of our students in the 21st century. The energy efficiency of the building is non-existent. A new building will include high efficiency that saves the district money. And even more so, it will provide the air quality that is healthier for the human beings inside it. A new building will provide natural light, something the human beings in our current building have very little of. Natural light is proven to improve the health and learning of everyone inside. As a steering committee member, I was delighted to serve with a counselor at the high school who brought up the need for private, quiet space for students during the day. The crowded area where the counselors are is not conducive for students to seek them out. We all have become more aware of the mental stresses on our students. We have the professional staff, but if we do not provide adequate space for these kids to relax, they may not seek out that professional staff. It is narrow and shallow to say that this is only bricks and mortar, or to insinuate that any board member just wants a bright, nice, new, shiny building for the fact that there's a bright, new, shiny building. We are thinking of the human beings inside that building, and there's a direct impact on them at the quality of this building, which is 60 years old. If the money is freed up, to your question, if the money is freed up, I would use it to remedy some of these issues by patchwork means while kicking the high school can further down the road. Anyone else?
This is Sherry. I would just say, to her point, if the money were freed up, I would want to see that used for our staff and our programs. I definitely know that we need a new building. I just don't want to have a new building at the expense of our staff and our programs. It would be wonderful to have a new band room, but if we have to cut band, what good would a room do us? It's wonderful to have science labs, but if we can't keep the teachers because they're $3,000 or $6,000 below the pay in Anderson or Scott or Fayette or Franklin, that's the issue. We have to invest, our funds, if they're freed up, into our people and our programs like we have, in the past, and that's why we're a top 5 district. That's why our children receive an excellent education. If we had money for both, I wouldn't have a word to say. But if we only have money for one, I'll always pick the teachers, the staff, and the programs over the bricks and mortar.
Anyone else? Okay, question 14. Given the fact that the board is considering multiple ways to build a new high school without sufficient funding, without athletic fields, and by cutting programs to our students, it seems appropriate to me at this time to reconsider the nickel tax. Many counties have failed at the initial attempt of the nickel, especially in counties where the people of the community were sold on false information surrounding the nickel, much like our first attempt in Woodford County. The difference between those counties and ours is they chose to keep fighting and fight for their kids via the nickel tax because they knew it was the only way to provide the students in their communities with the absolute best opportunities. And guess what? They have new state-of-the-art schools, including athletic fields. They were faced with much of the same pushback from the anti-nickel opponents, but continued to fight for the right thing and focused on the positive impact that the nickel provides. I think we are selling our students, faculty, and community short by not considering this viable option. An option that will provide us with the resources necessary to build a high school without taking away important programs and resources for our students. Perhaps we should reach out to our friends to the north in Scott County. As Superintendent Hubb said in a recent article on June 30, the nickel tax has given the school system new life. I think we deserve new life as well. I would like each board member to answer this question. The current funding option would require yearly tax increases, or you could reconsider the nickel. Neither have a sunset option, but the nickel could bring equalization dollars or free money from the state. Where do each of you stand in bringing the nickel back as an option for Woodford County? Please consider bringing the nickel back to, I'm sorry. Can anyone finish that? Please consider bringing the nickel back to the
table for the new life in Woodford County.
Okay,
Aaron.
is that in? Okay, by Aaron. Thank you, Sherry. So she wants each of us to answer this. Who wants to go first? Sherry?
Sure. I don't think that now is the time for a nickel. I do understand absolutely what she's saying, and I do agree that the nickel is the only real means of funding a high school that would be really worthy of Woodford. Now is not the time. At the draft budget, I said that I followed Mr. Hawkins and Amy's recommendation that I wouldn't support a 4% increase this year either. I just don't think in the middle of the pandemic, with what's going on economically with people, their houses, their businesses, their work, I just don't think now is a time. But I do think that, at some point, if we want a school that is really worthy of Woodford and that includes those benefits, we do have to look at that. I just don't think now is the time.
Okay, thank you. Ambrose,
Yeah,
you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Ms. Springate just said. I worked hard to try to pass the nickel tax because of many of the positive aspects of the passage of the nickel tax. And I agree with what she said in here, but now is not the time, and just not the time.
Allison?
I'll agree with Terry that now is not the time for a nickel. I'll go beyond that and say that I think that our taxpayers have spoke out and they are not in support of a nickel. Other than that, I think it comes down to the responsibility of the board to decide whether or not we can afford a new high school. And I think that's what we've been working on. I think we have worked diligently on that. And, no, I do not support a nickel. I will not support a nickel in the near future or even distant future. I have 2.5 years left on this board, so to answer Ms. Hines' question, I don't think that right now is the time at all to discuss another nickel.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to say that I did talk to our neighbors to the north. In fact, I met with a couple of Scott County School Board members last week because I was curious about what I'd read in the paper, kind of how they're handling this to have 2 new high schools in such a short amount of time. I did learn the paper may have jumped the gun a little bit, or at least the headline. I didn't read the whole paper, but they're really at the beginning. They're going to have to reopen their district facility committee because a new high school is not on their district facility plan. So they're in the process of getting that committee reopened. Then they'll go, as we all know, go through that and maybe add this second high school on the plan before they can go forward. They have no intention of trying to raise a new nickel for this new high school. They did raise a nickel and built Great Crossing. They have the funds. They have saved some funds, if I understood correctly, general fund for this. But, again, because they're so early, just like with the district facility plan, they don't have a BG1, they don't have a lot of those things, but they feel confident that with their growth that they can get that done. So I have talked to them, and it's very, very interesting, and I encourage all of us to, we all know how we learn more from school board members than any other source. Let's see if he said anything else. I wrote some notes down here. I think that's it. And as far as the nickel from Woodford County, I've said this before in a meeting, we all, Ambrose and I believe Sherry and Danny, we all went door to door. We heard lots of different things. I heard that we do not take care of the money we get. We never look at our expenses. We always ask for more. I heard that a lot. I think if we're ever going to set up for another nickel, we need to show a good forth effort that we've done that. And frankly, I think this year we've been extremely resistant to even approaching the topic. I also think, particularly when $350,000 is around 1% of our total budget. I also heard that we didn't look at other ideas. We never explored other ways. Let's just go for that nickel. I think that's what we've been trying to do for the last 1.5 years. Again, it's been a very popular thing to even explore it. Resisted a lot from the beginning. So I think if we ever think we're going to go for a nickel, we got some groundwork to do to show our community that we're just not going to go out and ask them for a nickel without doing some of the homework on our own end. All right, question 15. Governor Beshear has repeatedly stated budget cuts to school districts are likely with the shortfall in revenue our state is currently experiencing. Please explain to our community why the board voted to restrict $350,000 this fiscal year, knowing the state's uncertain economic forecast and knowing this restriction would lead to deficit spending. Sherry or anybody want to go on that?
Sure. I would just say that I voted no against that restriction. I absolutely agree with the statement 100%. I felt like it was wrong to, increase our deficit spending. We did unrestrict the $600,000, and so that's put back, but we're still ending this fiscal year in a deficit. And again, to Debbie's point, I think a budget is supposed to be kind of a balance. So if you take this 350 out to set it aside for the school, and you take that 1.2 million out and set it aside for the school, and you take that $600,000 or $700,000 and set it out to pay for bills that we've had with the new school, then you've got to balance that out with your budget, and dipping into contingency, which again, is for an emergency fund for one-time expenses, is just not it's just not sound. It's not financially responsible. So that is all I have to say.
Ambrose or Allison? Okay, I'm going to repeat myself again. The bonds are Ambrose, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Bonds, until bonds are sold, this is not final. Speaking for myself, I would prefer to keep the funds restricted until the new board comes on. We have received mixed messages about some of our projections and budgets over the years. I would prefer, or over the years, so I would prefer to keep this money restricted until we know more about what's going to happen to the state budget, where we know more if we're going to get the 4% revenue, because if we don't get the 4% revenue, this 350 is not going to be the majority of our problem. So I truly, it can go either way. We could unrestrict it now and restrict it later. That's more difficult for a new board to do. So I'm wanting to keep it restricted for them until it's absolutely, and we know more from the state, we know absolutely that it's going to be a big issue. Allison or Ambrose? Nope.
No, ma'am.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, question 16, it's short. Why are we taking a build what we can approach rather than a what we want approach? Chad Wells.
Ms. Elin, on this one, speaking just as an individual board member, I think we're taking a build what we need approach, and that is replacing what we currently have. And I do believe that we can do that. Thank you.
This is Sherry. I would just say that I really believe our community deserves a first-class school that will serve the needs and wants of our students for many, many years to come. And I just don't see how a downgraded partial high school fits that bill.
And I would say that I disagree this is a downgraded partial high school. There are some alternates depending on the bids that may have to go. That is unique. The biggest, of course, is the auditorium in my mind. But this is comparable to all of our other buildings, and we have fine buildings. And I'll point out again, it is comparable and it conforms with what KDE model is. It provides our students with the newest things. They won't be new in 15 years, but they're important for them now. And I really do not understand at all the continual characterization of this as a downgraded building. Kevin, or Allison's up, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I would just like to say that, we haven't discussed our increase in the distilled spirits funds that we'll receive, or the decrease in the sheriff's bill that we receive. I don't think that we have a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem. And I think that it's our task to attack that. I think we need to look into that and look into it deeply and see what we're doing wrong. I mean, there's money that we have, there's expenses that we have decreased, and there is revenue that we have increased. So we need to take a look at that. I mean, I just don't think that, I don't think that we're looking at the broad picture of everything. I think that we need to take all of those counts into effect and look at them deeply. I don't think that we need to just keep saying, we're losing this money, we're losing this money. We have made cuts, like the sheriff's bill. We made an extremely significant cut in that. And we gained money in the distilled spirits. So why can't we look at that and discuss that with our community? I mean, I feel like that we're just looking at a broad picture and everybody is saying, you know, we're doing this, we're doing that, when in reality, we have very fine, minute objects that we need to take a look at.
Allison, I would say I agree with you 100%. We do need to look at those things. And I think that's why Mr. Hawkins and Amy have given us such detailed budgets. They gave us that list of what we have all of our discretionary spending on. You know, even Mr. Chenoweth last meeting said that he'd never seen a board receive the kind of financial minute details that we've received. So we do need to look at it. My only point would be that Mr. Hawkins and Amy have said, yes, you do have a spending problem right now. That spending problem is you are setting aside, at that time, it was $950,000 of general fund for this high school. And then the other thing I would say is, Debbie, I used the word downgraded, not to be facetious or to, you know, upset you or trigger you. I used it because in every meeting that we've had, the architect has said, we have to do these, I forget what he even calls them, you know, some kind of value engineering, which basically is, there's that list of $4.5 million and basically they're cuts that you can do to the building. And I know Sam explained that some of those aren't cuts that you would see or you would notice. But again, I think that's, you know, a valid point, and what the person who asked the question, you know, is saying kind of goes back to the heart of what I believe too, is that, you know, to just build because you can doesn't make sense. You should wait until you're in a position that you don't have to pray that the costs go down. You don't have to pray that, you know, the bonding is just right. You don't have to pray that you can make these cuts to what the steering committee approved, just so that you can get in a position to have, you know, kind of a partial building. And so I understand his point, and I don't think he was being, you know, in any way disrespectful, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I mean, that's the basic bottom line. We're going to have cost savings at around $3.5 million or so to get it down to this number that may or may not, you know, allow us to build, you know, something that's just, you know, I don't think he was being facetious. That's all I'll say.
Ms. Evelyn, if I could respond?
Yes, please.
I think the characterization of this as some sort of second-rate high school is the most insane thing that I have ever heard in my career doing this for 30 years.
We've reached a new standard.
This facility was the process that we have gone through with the leadership committee and all of the meetings that we have been through, having the students, reaching out to the students, the teachers, the staff, the community on multiple occasions, and trying to distill that information into the plan that you have before us, I think was the most open process and the most informative process that I've been through. And to say that this is a second-rate facility, I think is just absolutely ridiculous. The process here for the value engineering is clearly not understood. If you look at one of the items on the value engineering, there's a direct purchase order item in there for a savings of $500,000. That is what VE is about. Let's not jump to conclusions about what value engineering is until we go through the process. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you.
And I would like to say, Debbie, that I respectfully disagree, and that clearly the majority of the public that has come to the forums and has submitted questions tonight have concerns. So I think it's incumbent upon us to answer those concerns. And again, I think we can respectfully disagree with each other. And I feel like that this question did not come from a place of disrespect or, you know.
Well, and I don't either. I just think it's a narrative that's been pushed. And I'm sure that a lot of the people that are disagreeing with Kevin, I'm not sure if they're architects, I'm not sure if they've been through this process. I don't know that they understand it as clearly as he does. So with all due respect, I'll listen to Kevin.
Ms. Evelyn, may I have 2 minutes, please?
Yes, please.
And I'll be very brief. The
Okay.
problem here is perception.
Yes.
And let me show, and for the public at large that is watching, and for those that are communicating with others, be it through social media, through telephone calls, or in person, listen to this statement. we're calling it value engineering or a lesser facility. Imagine this just for a moment. Kentucky Department of Education standards is not for a geothermal system. But we're saying we can save X dollars by not putting in a geothermal system. So you're going from an add or a deduct. That doesn't mean that you're putting an inferior system in. You're putting in a system that's in 80–90% of the schools in this state, and the architect has taken the time to come up with an enhanced system that says, if there's money available, we'll put this better system in, the best system. You're already getting a applicable and standard system that's put throughout the state. But if there's money there, maybe we say, okay, if we have the funds available, let's put in a geothermal system rather than a chiller or whatever system is being designed. So it shouldn't be thought that we're taking away. It should be that we're getting a design standard. If the funds are available, we're going to add to it for the betterment, both maintenance, long-term viability, comfort for the student staff, being able to control the rooms better in some instances. So all those things are enhancements for the system if the money's available. That's the reason the architect and construction manager comes up with so many options. That way the school does have the options for a standard system that is throughout the state and recommended and approved by KDE. And I just use geothermal as one instance. There are hundreds of things and decisions that the board, staff, architect, and construction manager goes through that the general public never sees. And a typical school construction project does not have near the scrutiny of this one as going on here. Kevin can tell you about where school systems, and I can too, with both of our firms working in a school district now, that there is next to no public input. Fact is, there is no public input, and the only way there's been public input would be through Zoom, because there isn't over 3 or 4 people shows up at the board meeting. And all this is done, and it's done, and they get a good school, and everybody's happy. But unfortunately, it is the way it is here, so we'll deal with that. The community at large needs to realize this is for the kids, folks. This isn't for the board members sitting here tonight, the architect or the construction manager. This is something the kids need. And I think that's being lost sight of.
I agree. And so just to be clear, these value adjustment choices, these alternates, this is we're not the only project where lists like this are thought about. This is a standard thing in any project.
It is. It's 90% of the projects that we do go through the same process. This is a very normal process. And the other thing that I do want to add is the term that we're giving everybody a partial high school. And I would just like to ask the question, do you consider the current high school a partial high school? Because if you don't, the new facility that we're that we're planning on is actually about 22,000 square feet larger than the current high school. So that's the terminology partial high school, I think, is a little bit misleading.
I agree. Allison, did you have something? Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
Absolutely. I just want to say that we are paying Kevin and his firm for their expertise. None of us. We're not construction experts. We're not architects. We're paying Kevin and his firm for their expertise. And I think that they have gone above and beyond in trying to respond to us and trying to communicate with us and engage our public. I think that they've done a great job. And for any of us to repeatedly ask the same questions over and over and over of them is a slap in the face to them. It's disgusting. It irritates me. I'm embarrassed for our community and for our board. I think that they've done an excellent job communicating with us and given us multiple options. And I want to personally thank Kevin and his entire firm and all of the people who work with him for being so transparent and being so informative and for taking the amount of heat that they have taken from our board, from our community, for their work. None of us work for free. None of us. As board members, yes, we do make a small amount of money. We're not here for the money, obviously. But, you know, we all are employees somewhere. Or we own businesses. I'm a business owner. And for someone to question my husband's expertise when he gives them his honest opinion and his valued opinion and an opinion that he has worked on over and over and over is an embarrassment. For me, it's an embarrassment for him, and I want to speak out for Kevin and his firm. I think they've done an excellent job, and everything that they've done has been for the children, it's been for our community, it's been for our board, it's been for the teachers. I think that I really feel like they have been slammed in the public eye, and to be quite honest, I'm done allowing that, and I will speak out for Kevin and his firm from here forward.
Debbie, this is Barry. I would just say that the public has a right to ask comments, and that as a board, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're asking questions and making sure that a $40 to $50 million expense, you know, that's our job to ask those questions. And it's not a problem if the public asks us questions. I know it can be uncomfortable sometimes, but again, I don't feel like this question was out of line in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
This evening, you know, I would like to echo what Ms. Richardson said and thank Kevin and his team for the work they've done. If they're able to finish this project, it will be a first-class building that offers unbelievable educational opportunities that are not available to our students now. I can remember walking through Martin County High School, Inez, Kentucky, a school that Kevin and his firm were the principal architect on, and listening to the superintendent talk about the differences in the lives of the students and the staff and the teachers, the opportunities. When this project is done, it will not be a second-rate high school. It will be one of the finest in the state. And I would like to echo what Allison said about Kevin. Kevin, you all have done a great job, and please pass that on to your staff from me. Thank you.
All right, question 17. What data is the Board of Education utilizing to determine that the community is behind a phased school project? Stephanie Wells. First of all, we have moved on from what was called a phased school project. I'm going to just talk for myself right now. Honestly, my preference was for just a classroom building to begin with. That would solve the issues surrounding the academic building would solve our major issue, which is to improve and in some instances create an environment for the major purpose of our district, which is the academic education of our children. However, the community spoke, board members decided, the community really spoke up and said, without a competitive gym, there's really no reason to build anything. So board members were persuaded, and that's perfectly fine. They just had a different opinion than me. I lost that vote. I lost that argument. Guess what? I'm moving on. I'm not going to fight it forever. But right now, the plan is to get a full building. And I do believe that while there may not be statistical data, the board did change, as Mr. Wilson referred to earlier, the board did change in response to community output. So, you know, it may come that something has to be left off, but we will, if the auditorium has to be left off, it'll break my heart, but I hope we'll get one in the future. But we will be leaving, if that's defined as partial, we'll be leaving a partial high school to go to another partial high school. You know, I mean, I just can't even imagine that anyone feels like a first-class educational academic building that's safe, environmentally sound, and healthy for our children is not worth it. So anyway, that's my response. Anyone else? Okay, question 18. Given some of the options with splitting ninth graders from the current 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, how will the school board ensure that high-achieving ninth graders who would enroll in AP classes receive the same benefit as upperclassmen, for example, quality teachers, upperclassmen perspectives, coursework? In theory, this should be easy, but logistically, it could be an issue if only 1 or 2 sections of the AP courses are needed. I would hate for ninth graders to lose out on quality teachers that our current high school students have, as well as losing out on classroom discussions with upperclassmen who may bring more mature perspectives to topics. And this question was submitted by Callie Reynolds. I'll say what I have to say. First of all, I know she realizes we also have wonderful teachers in the middle school. I also have questions about this option. And I believe that we would need much more input from our educators before we did something as drastic as changing the grade alignment in our schools. I will say that one of the great benefits of having the middle school and a high school so near each other and on the same campus is the possibility of shared facilities and the possibility of traveling between middle and high school for classes. But I think on that option that I as one board member would need a lot more information before I would want to pursue that. Yes, Allison?
I second what you said. I would like to have more input on that as well. That's not something that I'm really comfortable with making a full decision on right now. So yes, I would like to hear from our educators and see what they think about that as well.
Okay.
This is Sherry. Just real quickly, I'm completely against doing option 2, 1,000 classroom building and redistricting every elementary, the middle school and the high school. I don't think that that's even been on the radar or discussed, and certainly no pros or cons or consequences have been discussed with that. So that's really all I'd say about that.
Ambrose, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
I would want to add one more thing to that. I know that option did not come out of Kevin's, imagination. That was something that was actually brought up by a former chairman of the board at the forum. I know that Kevin has, as some of our very high former educators here have told me, that K through 6 is something that is very well thought of, and so that wouldn't be that big of a problem. So, Kevin didn't pull that out of thin air. He got it from the forum, and that's what the forums are for. So that's it for the questions tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for staying late. Before we sign off, I want to make sure and announce that next Tuesday night, we will be having another town hall / forum at 6 o'clock. It will start at 6 o'clock, I believe, instead of 6:30. So look for the advertisement on that. And that will be about the re-entry back into school in August. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Ms. Ealing?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, before I make a motion to adjourn, which I will,
Yes.
I wanted to thank you very much for your leadership during this meeting. It has been an outstanding meeting in my estimation, and a lot of that, the vast majority of that is due to your leadership, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ambrose. All right, we got your motion?
Allison's trying to say something.
Oh.
I just wanted to second that and say thank you, Debbie, and thank you to the other board members who were here tonight. I'm sorry Danny couldn't make it. I know she had an out-of-town trip, but, as much as the community or some of the community believes that we don't value each other's opinion, I actually do value each and every one of your opinions. They are taken into consideration. I love the feedback that we get from our partners with Baird as well as with Kevin and everyone else. So, we are working together. Even though we disagree, I think that we're working together. It's a difficult situation, but it's life. It's the way life is. And I'm appreciative of it. So Debbie, thank you. You did an excellent job tonight.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do you have a second? Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Wilson. It is second by Ms. Springate to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. See you all later. Thank you, Kevin.